The biggest problem with FIRE, financial independence, retire early, is that it might not get you there. And as someone that pursued FIRE for half a decade religiously before transitioning to what I would think is a better and more sustainable system, I want to share with you the 3 pitfalls that I realized that I had to avoid if I actually wanted to become wealthy, that I think I've successfully avoided by implementing a totally new automatic wealth building system. And it's just a better way of pursuing financial independence. And so let's get started. The first flaw of FIRE is the financial independence number that we set up and the amount of money that we save, which is the same number every single month to get to our financial independence number, doesn't assume life transitions occurring. And so what do I mean by life transitions? Life transitions could be a health scare, getting married, having kids. Life transition could be aging parents. Life transitions could be buying your first home, changing careers. It doesn't assume the costs of these life transitions will affect you in any way, right? Like at its core, it's just a save X amount of money to get X amount of money in the future. And that X amount of money in the future is based on a lifestyle that you understand today, not necessarily a lifestyle that you'll have in the future. I mean, I can tell you with full confidence right now that now with a wife and kids, my lifestyle is different than me when I was single. Like I would not subject my family to the lifestyle that I lived, right? Saving 70 to 80% of my income while working a 9 to 5. I would not subject that life to my son. I don't know if you would, right? That's your personal choice, but I would not. I personally would not. And I do not want to live like I am broke to one day retire and live like I am broke without working. And so I realized that the only way for me to get to the kind of life that I wanted to get to is to make more money and save more money, right? Don't get me wrong, like I still want to save, but saving 70 to 80% of a teacher's salary will not get me to the kind of life that I want to get to. In order to get there, I need to increase my income in some way, shape, or form, and that is either going to be start a business or change careers altogether. But I like my job, so I'm starting this business right now. I'm talking to you right now on this YouTube channel. That's a part of my plan. Another thing that it doesn't account for is the cost of sacrifice. So the worst situation, something that is behaviorally against what I want to do, is having my child come up to me and wanting something that is good for him and me having to say no. Right? Like not being able to send my son to a certain school, right? Not being able to give them a learning experience that would enrich their lives is something that I think about. That's for me though. Like for you, there might be certain experiences that you would deem non-negotiables, but you have to give up because of your pursuing this FIRE thing. And I'm not saying FIRE is bad. I mean, there's different forms of FIRE. There's lean FIRE, which I think is unsustainable. But then there's coast FIRE, which makes a little bit more sense, but requires a little bit more income. I'm not saying FIRE as a concept is bad. I'm just saying that if you pursue FIRE like it's just saving money to reach a certain financial milestone, then I would say that there's a certain naivete in pursuing FIRE like that. And so let's build on top of that with our second pitfall, and it's the static assumptions on returns and the lack of technical financial knowledge that you need to actually invest and be successful in the long term. And so one thing that I'll throw out to you is the idea of the 4% rule, right? So a lot of FIRE proponents say that if we save 25 times our yearly expenses, then that's the financial freedom number that we need to get to. But that 4% rule came out in the early 1990s, and the person that came up with that rule has gone on record to say that 4% is no longer enough because of increasing life expectancy, increases in the cost of living relative to our incomes. And so maybe a more realistic estimate is turning the 4% rule to the 3% rule. But that would change your financial freedom number by a lot. You would have to multiply it by 33.3, right, in order to get to your new financial freedom number, which is a huge change. It's literally going from, if your lifestyle is $100,000 a year, before you had to save 2.5 million, right? 100K times 25. Now you have to save 3.33 million, right? That's a substantial difference. That's only one static assumption that might be flawed. There's a second static assumption that might be flawed, and it's this whole idea of investing in the S&P 500 and then assuming you'll get a 10% return, maybe 7% inflation adjusted forever. And the idea of this comes from an idea called American exceptionalism, which is the assumption that America, in this case, American equities will continue to do well over time because they've done so well in the past 20 years. But when we look at the data from the early 1900s all the way up to today, we realize that American equities have not been exceptional for all of those times. I mean, most of the time, certainly, right? Around 60% of the time, they have been doing well. And if you're wondering where these stats come from, I was just watching a Ben Felix finance video. You should really check him out if you're actually interested in personal finance. The topics he talks about are quite advanced. So he's who I'm quoting from. And the idea is that American equities have not outperformed international equities 100% of the time. And the idea is that as stock valuations continue to go up, our expected returns in the future should decrease, right? Which makes sense because we're paying more for a certain amount of return, and so that return will go down over time. And so the 10% return assumes American exceptionalism. I'm not sure that is going to be true over the long run, and the long run being 10, 20 years. It might certainly continue to be true, but there's always this possibility of it not being true, which again throws a wrench into your calculations. Another thing that it doesn't talk about is exactly how you would want to approach getting to your financial freedom number. So like, what do you actually invest in, right? There are so many different kinds of asset allocations, and there's no one particular right one, but like, how do you first figure out an acceptable expected return? How do you even calculate expected return on your portfolio? Like, did you figure that out yet? And how do you come up with a portfolio that is behaviorally sound, that you'd be willing to stick to even when it's down 30, 40%, right? And so having a discussion with your spouse or yourself thinking about that is also important in understanding whether or not you can actually meet your financial goals. And so we have life transitions that are not being accounted for. We have these static assumptions that you're working on with FIRE. And I'm not even mentioning the idea that the stock market doesn't have really average annual returns over years. So it's not like 8% every single year. There are years where it's down 40%, there are years when it's up 20%. And so are you taking care of your expected volatility risks as you build out your portfolio, right? Like those are things that are not discussed when you're just getting started out on FIRE, unless you go deep into index investing as a discipline. Okay, let's build on top of that. FIRE is incomplete in terms of financial planning, right? So when we're thinking about financial planning, there are several core pillars that make up a good financial plan, right? There's the spending and saving aspect, there's the debt reduction aspect, there's the investing aspect, there's the retirement planning aspect, so you're dealing with tax advantaged accounts and how do you draw down on these accounts. Then there's the insurance aspect, protecting against downside risk, and then there's the estate planning aspect. And so FIRE really is only thinking about saving and investing. And even with investing, I wouldn't say you pursuing FIRE means you have a really good understanding of how equities work as investments, right? So really FIRE is just dealing with saving. It's a community that's really good at getting you to save money. Whether you've made prudent choices with that money you saved in investments, or whether you've accounted for other aspects of a financial plan for your family, that's all kind of up in the air. And so there's no thinking also about real estate. Like, how do you buy a primary residence? How do you save for a primary residence? How much should you be paying for a primary residence? What are the costs that go into real estate? And so it's incomplete, right? Like at best, it's incomplete when it comes to a comprehensive financial plan for a typical family's future. And so what I'm doing instead is, first of all, I want to make sure that I am living well today and I can live well in the future, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm not saving any money, but that also doesn't mean I'm having to save 80% of my income and live a really, really humble, frugal life, because that's not what I want to do. And so in order to be able to live the kind of life that I'm describing to you, I have to figure out a optimized portfolio that is actually able to generate reliable returns over time, so I can figure out how much money I need to save to live this kind of lifestyle. Otherwise, I'm in anxiety and fear mode, right? Because I don't know how my portfolio will generate returns for me, and so I have to save as much as I can to mitigate the risk of my own ignorance, if you will. Okay, and so if I figured out an optimal portfolio strategy, then for me, for everyone's different, that makes sense in terms of expected returns and also makes sense behaviorally, then great. As long as I'm meeting those goals, I can live life well today. I also want to figure out a way so I don't self-sabotage myself, right? So a lot of these times, portfolios get changed by people because they read the news, right? They hear about some exciting new opportunity. And so I don't want to do that. So I want to automate saving money, I want to automate wealth building, and I want to make a plan and stick to it. And by sticking to it, I mean remove myself from the equation. So I'm not the one making conscious decisions on how to build wealth, because I'm a human and humans make mistakes, and I don't want to make mistakes, and I am biased. And so I don't want to be biased when I make investment decisions. And then the third thing that I'm thinking about is, how do I actually earn more? Because I've realized that I can't actually save my way to the kind of life that I want to live. Certainly, yes, you can save your way to a level of financial independence where you're able to maintain a lifestyle that is a little bit more humble than the kind of life you're living today, or maybe even the same life that you want to live today. But if you want to own real estate, right? If you want to create generational wealth, then unless you have a high income job that's paying multiple six figures, or you have your own business, that's not really happening for the average Joe. And so thinking about how to earn more money should be really top of priority, because it also increases the amount of money you then can contribute to your portfolio, which will allow you to reach financial independence quicker, which is something that FIRE proponents really love as well, except their way of getting there is save more money. There's an alternative way, right? Like, how do you make more money? And so while there are very, 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 very valuable lessons that you learn, that I learned when I was pursuing my FIRE journey, half a decade into the journey, I realized that there were other aspects of personal finance that I needed to figure out if I actually wanted to create the financial future that I want for myself and my family. And so for you, what does this mean? I want you to think about the financial path that you're on, what could go wrong, and I want you to live life considering how it could go wrong and adjust accordingly. Okay, so what does all of this mean for you? I want you to think about the financial path that you're on. What is the trajectory that you're moving towards? And I want you to think about whether or not the assumptions you've made in investments, in saving, in spending are sound, right? Or whether there are factors that you haven't considered that might just throw your planning out of the window. And then I want you to adjust accordingly, like how I've adjusted accordingly for my situation. Now, if you want an actual automated wealth building system that takes care of all of this for you, and you want to learn that, then click the link below to learn the 4 transformations that you will need to build such a system. I look forward to talking to you soon.